Hi, everybody. This is Nalini Elkins with Industry Network Technology Council. I hope you can all hear me. Maybe somebody can send me a quick note in the questions panel to let me know that you're hearing me okay. And of course, if there's any problems during the webinar, please go ahead and send me a note to let me know. Otherwise, I will assume that everything's just fine. By the way, this webinar, as all our webinars, is being recorded, so you can have it afterwards. But just to let you know that if you ask a question or whatever, it will be recorded. So let's go ahead and continue. Just a couple of words about me. I've been working in this area for quite a while, mostly in IPv6, but in the last 7 or 8 years in cryptography and those protocols as well. So today, what we're going to talk about is kind of an introduction to what TLS is, how some of the performance implications, certificates, and the details of how the handshake works. This webinar will focus on the beginning, meaning SSL 2.0, all the way up to TLS 1.2, and we will treat TLS 1.3 very separately. It's quite a bit different, and it deserves its own webinar. We will be doing that later. Okay. So, what is TLS? Or it was originally known, of course, as SSL, Secure Sockets Layer, but it has since then become Transport Layer Security. So SSL was originally developed by Netscape and is for transmitting privacy. And the main functions of the protocol, as for most security protocols, are authentication, privacy, and integrity. And we'll see how those work in the handshake. And so there's multiple versions of TLS. What people call TLS version 2, it's actually version 1.2, or SSL V2, and so on. It's actually 1.2 and 1.3. And so TLS became, SSL became TLS in RFC 2246, which is 1.0, and 1.3 is the latest version that was RFC'd a couple of years ago. There's a few differences between SSL and TLS, but TLS 1.3 is quite a bit different. So if we want to implement TLS, how is that done? Well, actually, what you need to do within your application is make a TLS socket call, but underneath that, there are often crypto libraries that help you out, such as OpenSSL. But it depends. It depends. Just this morning, I was having a conversation about some changes that I need done in a Java application, and Java has its own SSL implementation and its own SSL calls. In this webinar, I will use SSL and TLS interchangeably, but really, I should really just stick to TLS and use SSL when I'm literally talking about the SSL versions, SSL v2 and SSL v3, which are, of course, deprecated but still in use. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. So you have to make a special TLS socket call. You have to say open secure socket instead of open socket. But as far as the TCP stack goes, it doesn't really know that you're doing a TLS session. As far as he's concerned, it's just a TCP application. It's at a different layer than TCP. So So it doesn't know if you're doing secure or insecure. And there's a lot of APIs that allow you to do that, to make the calls. And this becomes really important for a couple of reasons. One is because when there's new Cipher suites or new signature protocols. For example, there was a new signature protocol that came out for the MLS message layer security protocol, and that was not implemented in a number of the cryptographic libraries. And so, if you want to use something like that, you may need to code your own interface to that and redo HPKE or something like that. And so that can happen if the language doesn't support it. And the biggest problems that are going to come up is when we go to post-quantum crypto. When we go to post-quantum crypto, all the Cipher suites, let's say most of them, all the asymmetric and some of the symmetric Cipher suites will be changed or have much greater signatures or much greater key values. All of that needs to be changed both at the library layer as well as the language layer, which is the compilers, as well as, of course, your program itself. So that's where this becomes very important. So, as I say, just a quick note: if you're having problems hearing or anything, just let me know. So, okay. So TLS packet encryption. What TLS does is it protects the payload. It protects the TLS and IP layer are going out in the clear. And we will talk about what various versions of TLS encrypt. But the main functionality is around encrypting the payload. You can use IPsec, which is a different security protocol, actually much less frequently used than TLS. And that can encrypt well. Actually, you can embed the entire packet in, including the IP headers in another protocol, or you can encrypt the transport layer in the protocol. But with TLS, we will see the transport header. So, how does TLS work? What TLS does is that it uses asymmetric encryption to start the handshake and to generate the symmetric key that will be used for the flow of the session. So the asymmetric key is used for the handshake process. So what we're talking about in TLS, we're talking about the public key, private key encryption. So it uses a public key that is known to everyone and a private key that is known only to the sender or recipient of the message. And so that's the idea, is that you keep that secret. And we'll talk about some of the implications of this later on diagnostics. But let's leave it at that. We use public-private key infrastructure to start with. So Netscape, Explorer, Chrome, everybody supports TLS. And by convention, URLs that require TLS start with HTTPS instead of HTTP, and we use port 443 instead of 80. Again, this is by convention that we do that. So, what does a TLS packet look like? And so, what it has in it, it's got, of course, your source address and port flowing through unencrypted. And then it will have various things in there. It will have your flag, integrity checking, and the encrypted data. So let's look and see what happens. So you first have a handshake phase, and then you have a data transfer phase. And so what happens is that the connection starts with the handshake, and you do the initial setup. During that, what you do is you say, am I talking to the server that I want to talk to? How are we going to talk to each other? Which Cipher suite are we going to use? And if you want, you can also authenticate the client. That is the client who I think I'm talking to. And so no encryption is in use initially. And so anybody can read what the handshake looks like. And this is one of the areas where TLS 1.3 has changed things. So we'll talk about that when we get to that. So let's talk about what these packets look like. So the first thing happens is the client sends a client hello, and we'll look at that packet and see what it looks like. And in the client hello, you have lots and lots of fields in there. Basically, it tells you what is it that the client can do, what Cipher suites are supported, and how do I want to, which server name out of maybe multiples on the virtual machine that the server is running on, who do I want to talk to? Again, we'll look at that in detail, but that's the idea. You send a client hello. The server then responds with a server hello. He says, all right, you wanted to do a few, you wanted to talk to me. Here I am. And if they can agree on a number of parameters, then we continue. We will look in detail at each of these packets because it's very important to understand the handshake. And of course, if there's no match, then the communication will be ended right there at the server hello. But otherwise, the server will send its certificate, and if the client accepts it, then all goes well. Server sends hello, done. And if the client accepts the certificate and the other parameters, then he'll start doing a client key exchange and send these two packets. The change Cipher spec and client finished may be sent encrypted, and the server will send its also, and then data flow can start. If you see data flow starting, you can be sure that the handshake has completed properly. It's kind of interesting though. There are some websites. I can think of, say, Google, Facebook, maybe Amazon. I believe Amazon does this kind of thing too. They will go ahead and establish 6 or 7 different TLS connections, so they can multitask. They can send images maybe over one connection, the data over the other, and so on. A very good way to do it. And so sometimes you might not see application data flow start on all the sessions, but you will see it start on at least 1 or 2. So let's talk in detail on what it is, how these packets work. So as I say, the first thing that the client sends, and it has to be the client who initiates, and he says that I want to start this connection, and I want to do it using TLS, and it has a session ID in there. And the server has to agree to that. And what they're agreeing on is the common symmetric algorithm that they're going to use. And so let's take an example. For example, it could be like the client says, okay, I can speak English, Latin, and French, And if the server looks in his what his language capabilities are, for example, I'm just using language as an analogy, of course, they're talking cipher suites. And if the server says, well, I can only speak German, Hindi, and Urdu, then of course you're not going to be able to agree on anything. So you have to agree on what the cipher suites that you have. And by the time we've gotten to TLS 1.2, I'm telling you, I see huge numbers of cipher suites being passed back and forth. That was one of the things that TLS 1.3 did, is to scale that back to 4 to 5, actually, to 5. But actually, interestingly enough, when we get to post-quantum crypto, you're back up to quite a few more. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to limit the number of cipher suites, because this is such an ongoing field, and things, you need to do cipher suites for different purposes. The other thing that's important to look at is the order of preference. So they'll say, my first language is English, and if you can, that's what I would like to do. And we'll see a case study coming up that will show you some of the performance implications of that. Yep. So once there is agreement on the symmetric cipher suite, the server says to the client, here's my public key. I'm going to send it to you in my certificate. And this is called server authentication. The idea behind this is to say, I am indeed who you think I am. And it is signed by the certificate authority, and the digital signature is also in the certificate. In TLS up to 1.2, up to and including 1.2, the certificate is sent in the clear. With TLS 1.3, that changes. And so this is one of the interesting things we'll look at, is what happens to the certificate. Because if you guys are doing TLS diagnostics and looking at problems, quite often you'll find the problem in the certificate. Maybe it's a self-signed certificate authority, maybe the certificate has expired, or one of the intermediate certificates, and so on. And so that's something that can be very helpful in diagnostics. So as I said, there's a lot of implications for diagnostics when you get to this. But of course, the reason it was encrypted is there's a whole lot of information that is passed in the clear over the wire. And a lot of people feel like maybe that's too much information. There's always a tussle, as they say, between privacy and network management. So the next step is for the client to verify the server cert. And if he says, sure, it's okay, then we'll continue. Otherwise, if it says, no, the date has expired, and it could be an expired date somewhere in the certificate chain, because as you guys are, I'm sure, well aware, you can have a root certificate, intermediate certificates, and so on. It can get to be quite large. And so if there's a problem server somewhere in there, including a problem maybe with self-signed certificates, the client can say, okay, he can ask the user, all right, do you want to accept this certificate even though it's self-signed, or do you want to abort the communication? And interestingly enough, I'm trying to remember which browser I saw this in. Some of the browsers will do that for you automatically. They'll just say, sure, I accept this self-signed cert, and others won't. Anyway, you can see problems. You can see problems in this phase, or differences in implementation, shall I say, in various browsers on this. But remember, of course, TLS is implemented not just in browsers, but in many, many, many other protocols as well. You know, I mean, FTP, so many other things use TLS, Quick, yeah, all the new DNS encrypted protocols and so on. So then once the client has the server public key, he encrypts a random number with that public key and then sends it back to the server. That's called the challenge. And the server says, let me see if I can decrypt that and see what I get out of that. And and that will prove that we have the right exchange going on here. And this part can take a little bit of time, but you know, really, it's all relative when we talk about time. There are quite a few other things which may also take time, but a lot of this stuff is now being offloaded to hardware, which is probably really good. Of course, the problem with offloading stuff to hardware is then how do you change it if there is a problem that is found. So what happens then is that now only the client and server know this secret random number, the pre-master secret, and that is used to generate the keys to encrypt and decrypt the data. So remember in the beginning, what we said is that with the client hello, server hello, we select a symmetric algorithm, say AES or something like that. Ideally not DES, something probably AES or 256, something like that. And then we use that because the data phase has to be done using the symmetric algorithm, because using public key, private key, or asymmetric encryption is costly. So then we start the protocol phase of a data transfer. If you want to send a client certificate, then it is a more complicated handshake. What will happen then is that after the server sends its certificate, it will ask the client to send its certificate also, then send the hello done. The client says, all right then, I will send you my certificate, and the server will verify that. And so at any of these points, things could fall apart. The client could say, no, I don't have a certificate to send you, or I send a zero length certificate, something like that. And I've seen that happen. And the server can say, I actually don't support zero length certificates. I asked you for a real certificate. I've never understood how it's okay to send a zero length certificate when you've asked for one. But in any case, there we are. So it's a more complicated handshake. Here's some more to let you know about mutual authentication. We'll be talking only about server authentication in our case right now. So let's look at this. This is an old trace using SSL version 2, SSL version 3, but it is almost exactly the same thing today. So that's what I'm showing you some of the older ones to show you that the packet formats or the packet layouts really haven't changed. The content of the packets themselves, yes, but the flow hasn't changed until we get to TLS 1.3. Then the flow changes quite a bit. But you'll see client hello being sent, server hello, certificate and server hello done in the same packet. That's quite often what you see. And then client key exchange, change Cipher Spec, and then the encrypted handshake, which is the finished. That's what you see. And then on the other side, you see change Cipher Spec. and the encrypted handshake message, which is the finished, that all going, and then application data flow starts. So you think, okay, grand, we finished successfully. So let's take a look at a client hello. And you'll see here, the first thing you'll see, let me bring up my little highlighter. So the first thing you'll see, the message type that says client hello, and the version, this is an SSL 3.0 version. Of course, SSL 3, TLS 1.0, and TLS 1.1 are deprecated. So you should not be seeing this. You should be seeing TLS 1.2 pretty much on your networks. So, and then you see, but it works exactly the same way. It's just that you see TLS here. And then you'll see all of the different Cipher suites that are supported. And that's what we usually see, is we see tons and tons of Cipher suites. And if you start breaking that down, what you'll see is what is the symmetric, the ciphers, the key exchange, what kind of Cipher suite, the symmetric algorithms, say RC4, and then the hashing MD5 128. Some of that, of course, is also deprecated. So you can see how things have become deprecated quite a bit. RSA itself is being deprecated in TLS 1.3. Yeah. So let me put this thing back. Okay. So here is the server hello. So you'll see here the server hello, and you'll see within there that it has accepted this one. It says, okay, I'm going to use TLS. This is the Cipher suite we're going to use to talk between ourselves. And the next packet then is the certificate. So you know that you've reached agreement on this, and you can keep going. So the next packet to flow from the server is the certificate, and it has the handshake type that says this is a certificate. And you can see here, this is only a single certificate that's being sent, and you can see where the signature is. This is the signature and who has signed it. This is the certificate authority, which is Equifax, and what the algorithm they used to sign with. When we get to doing post-quantum crypto, the signature length will increase dramatically. There's a lot of work being done to increase this. To decrease the size of the signature keys, or how this is all done. It's not easy because, as I say, the first thing that needs to be done to handle post-quantum crypto is to make sure that the protocols can handle it. And, if you start having now handshakes that have keys that are 64K bits long, something like that, or even greater, there's some dramatic increases in all of this. So just be aware that a lot of this is changing, first with TLS 1.3 and next with post-quantum crypto. So we're going to need to keep up with all of this as we go. And I will be doing a session on TLS 1.3 soon. Another interesting thing that you will see is certificates that are embedded in XML. That gets even more interesting here. You'll see that this is an XML message, and within there, you'll see the handshake itself. That makes it quite interesting. You'll see that there's also endpoint messages in there. Things can get very complicated, and TLS is used everywhere, but it works the same way. It's the same protocol flow. It's just incorporated within other things. You'll see that also if you look at QUIC or DNS over HTTPS, as I say, is under the covers, they're using TLS. I believe TLS is the most widely used security protocol ever on the internet. And so here it is. You'll see multiple certificates being used here. Again, all inside of XML. So let's talk about extensions. So within the client hello and the server hello, you can have various extensions, and there's quite a few of them. The SNI, elliptic curve, session ticket. There's many extensions which further define what the client will and won't support. Let's look at a couple of them. The first one has to do with thinking about when handshakes happen and to reduce the time. You saw what I showed you about all the flow that has to happen, and if you have to start a TLS handshake for all the various components on a web page, you can see that can take quite a bit of time. And so what people are trying to do is to use the session ID reuse. And so what they've put in here is a session ID in here. And what that does is that the TLS server remembers the pre-master secret and what session that I was using before. Basically, it's saying, here's the secret we agreed on before, and this is the session we were working on, so that if you want to continue it, we can just use that one. So let's say that I was talking to you 1 minute ago and you want to talk to me again. Well, we don't need to go through the whole thing. We'll just remember it and reuse it. So that makes the handshake smaller if you want to use session ID reuse. But now we have a TLS Time Out or SSL Time Out. And what that is that you want to not just use the previous pre-master secret if the guy was talking to you an hour ago. You may want to talk to him if it's 5 minutes ago, but not an hour ago. But even if you reuse that, the derived keys are different. So it's not like you're using the very same thing. It's just a trade-off between how long you want to keep that secret in memory. And so let's talk a bit about session tickets here. So you'll see there's, because we were talking about the extensions and so on. Don't worry, I'll get to that. So one thing you need to look at is you encapsulate the session state into a ticket, and then you can resume a session using that. This all has to do with not resuming sessions too quickly. Yeah. So there is an extension, the renegotiation indication extension. And that is because what can happen is that session renegotiation is vulnerable to an attack. So what happens, and we'll go through this again, the attacker starts a TLS connection, does a few things, and then adds in a different connection. And as I say, we'll go through this. And this is one way that extensions are used. And so this extension will tie renegotiations to the specific connection that we were working on. So let's see how this works, okay? So this is the TLS renegotiation man-in-the-middle attack. So let's see how that works. So the first thing you do is you have your initial handshake between the client and server. And so you do some things. And in that, you do another handshake. Under the protection of that initial one. And so then you've got a new channel. And so what happens is that the initial traffic and the client traffic are thought of as being in the same context. And so the attacker is sending you other traffic and treating it like it was the original traffic. And so this extension is there to help prevent that kind of thing. And so that's why we have this vulnerability, is that the attacker can then inject data to you. There's a lot of other protocols that can be vulnerable, such as this. All of these protocols, a lot of stuff attacks or embeds TLS. And so if TLS is vulnerable to something, all the other protocols are also. So then we have the renegotiation extension to help prevent that. Another very important extension is the SNI, or server name indication. And so what it will do is that you can have a VM or a server to have multiple sites off the same IP address. And the server name indication will say, this is the one out of those that I want to talk to. Because you can have, maybe you're running, who knows what, websites 1 through 10 on there. And this is the one I want to talk to. And it's right in the server name. Now, one of the things that is being done is that there is there's an I believe it's an adopted draft for encrypting various parts of the client hello, including the server name, because people again feel like that lets out it provides too much information to the attacker, if you know that. But of course, it's very useful to know which server name you're going to if you're doing diagnostics. But yes, so because the server, as I said, the server name is important because the certificate can cover multiple host names, and so the server subject alt name field may be used in there, and you'll see that those are DNS. But as I say, if it's encrypted, it becomes more difficult. There's a number of extensions around elliptic curves. We talked about that somewhat in the introduction in the Cipher suites. Let's review that again, because even though different elliptic curve formats and so on, curves and all of that will be used, these extensions are still used in TLS 1.3 and in post-quantum crypto. You'll see the elliptic curve extensions being used. They're slightly differently used, but they are used. So we'll talk about that. So what's the point of elliptic curve, to give us a refresher? So the point of keys is to prevent, at a minimum, the most basic attacks. And the most basic attacks on a key is brute force. That is, you try every possible key. Let's say let's say, who knows what my key is? Let's say I think, well, is it Tiger? No, I change one. Is it Figer? No. Is it Fimer? And so on. And so you try every permutation until you get the key. If you have a short key, that's very easy to do. But if you have a large key, of course, it becomes harder. There's some interesting things about I don't mean to dwell on post-quantum crypto quite so much, but it's really dramatically transforming everything. So we do need to keep it in mind anytime we're talking about things, is what is the world we're going to be walking into in the next 5-10 years. And interestingly enough, I do hear of people announcing post-quantum crypto capable applications and so on coming up. So this is happening today. So what happens with symmetric keys under post-quantum crypto is there is one algorithm. I believe it's Grover. And what it will do is it shrinks the amount of time. I believe it's square root n, something like that. I mean, as I say, it's an interesting thing. It's like it reduces brute force attacks, because even under post-quantum crypto, for symmetric keys, what you have to use is brute force attacks. So because there's no algorithm that's used. Like the reason quantum computers can break asymmetric algorithms is because they're doing things like prime number factorization, and so that's a dramatic increase in the time that's or decrease, I should have said, the increase in terms of what capability quantum computers give, but decrease in terms of how much time is required. Not so for symmetric keys. Symmetric keys, even under post-quantum crypto, are going to need are done through brute force. So in any case, it's the length of the key then that determines the strength. And elliptic curve cryptography was defined to reduce the size of the key and maintain the security of the encryption because of IoT devices, and also transferring these keys back and forth. But then we come to post-quantum crypto and brute force attacks. So you see how complicated all this stuff is in terms of what we need to consider, because sure, you have IoT devices, but it does us no good if the encryption to the IoT device is broken. But if you have huge keys and you can't even get the handshake finished without 10 packets, then this takes quite a bit of time. So in any case, and so as I say, these are the troubles that we undergo when we're defining and working on the protocol. Very interesting. But these extensions are to tell you what curves do we accept for elliptic curve, and what specific curves within there do we accept. And if you want, you can go back through the earlier presentations if you want to know more on elliptic curve cryptography, how that's done. But that's how this extension looks. It says these are the curves that I will accept for doing this. So one of the interesting things you'll see is when you have SSL v2 hellos, you'll see it has no extensions. So that is a big change. Other than that, the client hello is the same. I mean, the packet flow is the same, but there's no extension. So you can see how much functionality you don't have. But of course, SSL v2 has been deprecated for many, many years. But you know what? I'll tell you, up until about 2 or 3 years ago, I would still see it in the wild. I really don't now. And TLS 1.3 will just start a tiny introduction to it. And TLS 1.3 says you can't use SSL v2 hello. So, and a bunch of other things. So we'll talk about that next time. So here's a little case study on some problems. There's so many we could do, but this is an interesting one. So this is something that I was working on with a public university, and they were actually using a mainframe TCP application, and they were actually, this is actually in the older days that they were using SSL. So what happened is that when the students registered for a dorm room, they went into a web portal, and in the back end, those of you who are mainframers will know that they used CICS. That's one of the web platforms, or the platforms, I should say, that IBM has. And so when students started working, then the address space or the region that was running that got hung and had to be restarted, and the students were, calling into the help desk and so on. And so that's when people reached out to me and said, "Can you help us out here?" So I said, "Sure." And so let's take a look. And so they had done a few things themselves. And so what the application did is said, can you, I want to select my roommate, and this is the dorm I want to live in, so on. And it's only available for 1 week out of the year. So the first thing they tried is they said, okay, well, the first day, only the honors students can come in. The next day, the seniors, the juniors, the next day, and so on. And everything worked fine until the last day, when the students who didn't have such good grades, and the freshmen and everybody else who had not signed up when they were supposed to, when everybody else, like, oh my God, then we have to sign up now, it's the end date. So then chaos erupted. So clearly there's some kind of scalability issue going on here, right? But what scalability issue? So we said, okay, well, let's look at this. Let's look and see what we have. And so what we do is that the student logs on to this web page, and it's actually a CGI script running under the HTTP web server, and we're using port 443. And the script does a connection to CICS, gets the data, and passes it back, interestingly. So then we started looking, well, let's see what the security specs are in the HTTP web server. So within there, they said, what are the Cipher specs? And you're seeing here is like the higher the number, the higher the strength of the cipher that's used. And so it's basically going with the strongest one first. So where is this going to show up? It's going to show up in the client hello. So if this shows up as the first one in the client hello, that's what's going to be taken. And so, here's the specification. So what we did is we just said, well, why don't you just do it to go from the lowest strength to the highest? And so we said, we'll negotiate the lowest strength. And then that really opened things up. So very, very interesting, is that just the strength of the Cipher spec itself and doing the encryption, that was taking all that much time. This is a very interesting problem that really opened up a lot of stuff. Now TLS is often done in the hardware, and especially on IBM mainframes. Again, that's very good, but if you need to change it, then that becomes a problem too, is you need to change your hardware. And we really, really need to look at a few things now. I would like to redo this study using both TLS 3, using TLS 1.2, TLS 1.3, and some of the post-quantum crypto stuff. Because as I say, the post-quantum crypto ciphers and the signatures are very, very large. We are also looking at potentially looking at the power consumption used for various Cipher Specs. We have a grant that we have applied for, so that we can look at power consumption used for various Cipher suites. I think that's a very, I mean, of course, certainly one doesn't want to get rid of HTTPS and encryption altogether, but the question really is, do you need a $100 lock to protect a $1 resource? I mean, do you really need something that strong to protect some child from signing up for a dorm room? I mean, if somebody else signs up for them, they're going to come and tell you, hey, somebody signed me up for something. It's not like bank fraud or something, or losing military secrets. Do we really need, so you have to think, what do we really need to protect? But that was very, very interesting. So we had an interesting conversation on that. We helped to fix their problems. So let me take some questions now. Let me see if I have any in the chat window. No, I'm not seeing any. So we have a few minutes, so I can certainly take some from if anybody has any ideas or wants to talk over anything, just go ahead and raise your hand, and I can give you a chance to talk. You can also ask about any things you'd like to see. Okay, so I'm seeing some hands. Okay, yeah, Jeff, please go ahead.
Hello, Nalini. This is Jeff Beach Garwood. Can you tell me what post-quantum crypto is, please?
Okay, so what post-quantum crypto is what many experts believe is that in the next 15 years, there's a 90% chance that in the next 15 years, a quantum computer that is capable of breaking all our asymmetric encryption will be built. That computer may be built by the US. I mean, IBM and Google are putting in a great many resources into doing that. And it has, people have quantum computers today. They have them today. It's just they're not powerful enough to be able to break these keys. So, but in 15 years, people think they will be. If that happens and we don't change the way we're doing things, if we continue to use TLS 1.2, for example, using the same encryption methods we're using, that quantum computer will be able to break that encryption. So post-quantum crypto cipher suites, which cannot be broken by a quantum computer, are being developed, and NIST just standardized a number of those. Those are being incorporated into the protocol. So TLS has incorporated what they call, there's a draft out for hybrid key exchange, which is the new Cipher suite as well as the classic one. But it also has to be put into OpenSSL and all the other crypto libraries. and then into Java and C++. Jeff, am I making sense to you? Did I answer your question?
Yes, I do understand what you're saying. Thank you. Although, if somebody has built a computer in the next 15 years that can do this, it's going to be costing millions and millions, or maybe even approaching billions of dollars. So it's not going to be something that people are going to, the average bad guy is going to have access to.
Quite likely. This is something, you are correct. Yeah. If it's even feasible, there are some scalability issues, but as I say, experts believe there's a 90% chance. We live in a probabilistic world, right? And so 90%, I'm going to say that's pretty good odds. The most likely culprit will be a nation state. It would have to be a nation state that does not wish us well.
Yep. Okay. I got you. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts? Otherwise, we'll continue with TLS 1.3. The very next webinar that we'll do will be on IPv6. We'll talk about our work with IPv6 and cloud. If any other thoughts, please send me an email. Otherwise, thank you all so much. And if there's other things you guys would like to see in these webinars, please let me know as well. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.